So it's no secret that I love nature and that I love playing with Dharma analogies. And one of the best Dharma analogies that I like to play with is the idea that the mind is like a garden that we need to cultivate. And one of the biggest obstacles to growing the fruits and the flowers of our wisdom and compassion are the weeds of the afflictions. In Buddhism, we talk a lot about the afflictions, the disturbing emotions and incorrect views that disturb the tranquility of the mind. But what exactly is a weed? That depends on how you label and interpret it. In the world of ecology, an invasive species is any kind of living organism, plant, animal, insect, fish, even bacteria, that's not native to an ecosystem and causes harm. It causes harm when it grows and spreads aggressively, outcompeting other species, which disrupts the natural diversity and balance of the ecosystem, which is very similar to the self-centered thought, which quickly proliferates and exaggerates, forgetting about the diversity and richness of life, forgetting about how we depend on each other for our life, for our happiness and our spiritual growth. Invasive species get spread largely due to humans, from transportation on ships, vehicles, people hiking in different places of the world, and especially from innocent gardeners wanting to plant pretty little flowers, like a beautiful yellow flower called salsify, or a lovely white flower called the ox-eyed daisy. While a few plants or animal species may not seem like a big deal, 42% of threatened and endangered species in the world are at risk to extinction due to invasive species. So it's a big problem. And we can also look at our minds to see that if we let the afflictions run wild, it ruins any chance for cultivating positive, virtuous mental states and takes us further away from being peaceful and happy. There are many different ways of identifying or categorizing invasive species. And the term noxious weed is a label used to categorize kind of the different species into the top wanted or the most harmful species list. So just like how we know that anger, attachment, and ignorance are the biggest afflictions of the minds, and most of us at the Abbey have learned to identify knapweed, St. John's wort, and mullein, it's very important to also identify other invasive species that aren't so well known, because those can also quickly take over. Just like how there are many afflictions like comparison, competition, and arrogance that can seem subtle and unimportant, but they can sneak up quickly and completely obscure our minds. So this is when the qualities of mindfulness and introspective awareness that we're working on developing in meditation are so important. To pay attention to when the mind is getting a little bit obsessive, a little bit hyper-focused on just one thing, repeating the same thoughts or stories over and over again, forgetting to take a larger perspective and survey the landscape of the mind from a broader view. Really looking at the overall pattern of the thoughts and seeing what the trend is and if it's in balance with reality of what's actually going on in front of me. This is kind of like our drain field that we have out back here, is that in a way we've done a great job of looking at the eradicating knapweed and mullein and St. John's wort from the surrounding of the property. I actually tried to look for some knapweed and couldn't find an example. But, it's also important to keep paying attention to what other species are sneaking in. Like this little fuzzy guy is starting to take over, and there's this, I think it's called birdfoot trefoil, which is growing on the road that's like 5 feet tall. So it's very easy to focus on one target species and forget about all the other things that are sneaking in. There's one plant in the drain field that I've identified that I don't know what it is, but I know it's an invasive because it's got sticky, spiky seeds and it's spreading quickly. So even if I don't have a label for it, I can know it's not good. There's a saying in the world of invasive species management called early detection, rapid response, which is kind of the same idea. If you find one plant that you know is an invasive, it's so much easier to take care of getting rid of that one plant rather than letting it spread. And so it's important to pounce on eradicating it quickly. because once it's out of control, like we've seen with the bulbous bluegrass and plantain, that once it's out of control, it's impossible or very, very hard to get rid of. And the same idea applies to trying to catch the afflictions when they're small. That first hint of irritation or exaggerated grasping, if we can catch that one judgmental thought towards someone and turn it into a virtuous thought, it can be so much more effective in subduing it. Switch my mind to eradicating that negative thought and turning to appreciation or some sort of positive attitude can really stop that seed from growing. Just like how with knapweed, one single plant can produce 25,000 seeds. So if I remember that one negative thought can also grow into 25,000 negative thoughts if I let it proliferate, I'll be a lot more mindful about wanting to catch it early and not letting it spread. Because once it's out of control, it takes so much more effort. Another important thing to keep in mind in working with invasive species and removing the target enemy is replacing it with what you want, not just focusing on getting rid of it, but cultivating virtuous qualities to plant those native flowers and the healthy plants that will balance the ecosystem. So to not just focus on the negative, but to continually work on rejoicing in your own or others' qualities, and to nourish the seeds of compassion and kindness, and to take delight in all the goodness that surrounds us. I found that this is so important to do on a daily basis, not just seeing all the afflictions in my mind of just like, oh yeah, I have all this anger, arrogance, jealousy, blah, 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 that just can be overwhelming and depressing, but how important it is to keep recognizing I do have those good qualities of compassion and kindness, and to really nurture and nourish and acknowledge those, and to put more effort into cultivating and really recognizing those qualities. Another way to work with the afflictions and invasive weeds is to first learn to identify it. Just like how we can easily think that something like attachment is a good thing, and that these pretty pink little flowers called the perennial pea vine is nice and attractive, it can soon become very strangling and tangling and take over things and actually cause wildlife to get tangled up in them. I've seen the little turkey babies having a very hard time navigating over the tangled vines. So it's so tricky to think that something's good, but then, I mean, with attachment, we think it's a good thing, but we can, when the flowers die, then we see the tangled mess that it leaves. And it also sets up the mind for that habit to continue, to chase after external pleasures, exaggerate its good qualities, and develop all sorts of expectations of how it should always bring us pleasure. But identifying weeds are tricky, because just like how Venerable Monlam has been teaching us that not all weeds are horrible because they have the label of weed, but that can actually be nutritious food, we have to learn to identify what actually causes harm and what is beneficial, which isn't always easy to do. Sometimes speaking up with confidence is very important and beneficial, while other times speaking up out of anger or arrogance with the wish to control people is not helpful. It's the same action, but very different motivation, and also brings very different results. Just like how the plants milkweed, fireweed, and sneezeweed are all important native plants, but when they're put in different environments and given the label weed, they're considered harmful. So it can be hard to know exactly what is a weed. It takes a lot of wisdom and understanding to really know what results our thoughts and actions will be. It takes a lot of observation and paying attention to what really causes harm and what really causes benefit, of how those thoughts and actions can create a genuine healthy balance, which is always shifting and changing. So as we work on cultivating a flourishing garden within our minds, let's use nature as a great teacher to show us how to work on growing a balanced mind that's supportive to all of the diversity of life. And as we work on developing a sustainable mind, we can also help in collectively making a sustainable world for the benefit of all beings.